Alright, so today we're going to finish up the first half of Trig with section 13.8 about trig values, and we've been talking about cosecant, secant, and cotangent for a little while. Haven't done a whole lot with them, but today we're going to do that. Okay, your cosecant is equal to 1 over the sine of theta, which is just the sine function flipped over. The secant is equal to 1 over the cosine, which is really just the cosine flipped over. And then cotangent, remember that is 1 over tangent theta, and that's just the tangent flipped. So now, what I want to look at is how to find the values of different trig functions. We've already done it in chart form, and y'all seem to understand that, pretty well. But now we're going to go back to a list and see if you can do it here. Okay, it's the exact same thing. The very first thing you do is you find a coterminal. I want to be between 0 and 360. And this says to include 0, but not include 360. Or if you're in radian measure, 0 to 2 pi. And you should include 0 in your answers, but not 2 pi. And then you have to figure out what quadrant the angle is in, what is positive or negative in each quadrant, what your reference angle is. And remember, your reference angle, if you are in degrees, it is always going to be between 0 and 90. Or if you're in radians, it's going to be between 0 and pi over 2. Okay, then you're going to find the sine, cosine, or tangent. And then you're just going to flip it if they ask for the cosecant, secant, or cotangent. So now we've got to talk about this chart at the bottom, and I already did it with some of the classes, and I've changed it just a little bit since the last time I used these notes, and I didn't retype it here. But in quadrant 1, A is for all, S students, T take, and C classes. Because you guys let me know that not everybody's going to take calculus, but all students take classes. Now, what do all of those mean? A means all 6 trig functions are positive. So in quadrant 1, if I'm talking about 30 degrees, and I ask for the sine of 30, it's going to be positive. The cosine of 30 is positive. Tangent of 30 is positive. Cosecant, secant, and cotangent of 30 are all going to be positive. Now over here in quadrant 2, there's an S. I said students. Well, the sine function and its reciprocal, that's the cosecant, those two are going to be positive. But they are the only ones that are positive for angles that are in quadrant 2. So if I'm talking about 135 degrees, the sine of 135 is positive, the cosine of 135 will be negative, tangent of 135 will be negative, the cosecant of 135 will be positive, the secant will be negative, and the cotangent will be negative. Quadrant 3, T. I said take, all students take. Well, that is for the tangent and its reciprocal. So tangent and cotangent are the ones that are positive here. So if I ask you for, to find the value for the trig functions for, say, 210, okay? So if I ask for the sine of 210, it's going to be negative. Cosine of 210 is negative. The tangent of 210 will be positive. And you just kind of see how that's going. So now, last down here, classes. All students take classes. That C stands for cosine, and its reciprocal, that is the secant. Those two are positive. So if we're talking about 300 degrees, it's about here, and I ask for the sine of 300, it's going to be negative. The cosine of 300 will be positive. The tangent of 300 will be negative, and so on. So now we're ready to try a few problems together. So here, starting out, number 33 at the top, if I want the sine of 240 degrees. Remember, first thing on our list was to find a coterminal that was between 0 and 360. Well, this is already there, so I can skip that step. Then I need to know what quadrant this is in. In quadrant 3, that's where you get things between 180 and 270. So this is quadrant 3. In quadrant 3, the tangent and cotangent are going to be positive. Well, I want to know the sine of 240, so that means it's going to be negative. It's going to be a negative number. After that, I've got to find a reference angle. Well, how far is 240 from the x-axis? Well, 240 minus 180 is 60. So my reference angle is 60. And then I'm going to find the sine. And we've done that using the trig on our hand. 60 degrees is here. 0, 30, 45, 60. In your ordered pair, your cosine comes first, your sine comes second. So the sine of 240 is square root of 3 over 2. And we already figured out it was negative. So the sine of 240 is negative square root of 3 over 2. Alright, so let's do number 36 together. Okay, 510 is not between 0 and 360, so I have to find a coterminal. I'm just going to subtract 360 from that, and I'm going to find the cotangent of 150 degrees. Now, that happens to be in the second quadrant, and in quadrant 2, the sine and the cosecant are the ones that are positive. So I know that the cotangent of 510 is going to be a negative number, because in quadrant 2, my cotangent is negative. Then I've got to find a reference angle. Okay, back to this 150, that coterminal. 150 is 30 degrees away from 180, so 30 is my reference angle. So here, 30 degrees, there's 0, 30, and I want the cotangent. Well, to get the cotangent, I've got to find the tangent. Well, I know that tangent, another color here. I know that for this one, the tangent is equal to the square root of 1 over the square root of 3. Yes, you should rationalize it, but that's not our final answer. We're just going to flip that to get the cotangent. So the cotangent is going to be the square root of 3 over the square root of 1, which is just square root of 3. And we had already figured out that it was negative. Okay, so this is like that big chart we did, but you're only finding specific trig functions. You don't have to find them all for this. Okay. So now, down here at the bottom, some of these are worded a little bit differently. It says the given point P is located on the unit circle. Find sine theta and cosine theta. Well, because all of these points are on the unit circle, your x value is your cosine, your y value is the sine for each of these. So I know that cosine theta is negative 3/5, and sine theta is 4/5. No, those aren't the angles that or the values we're used to seeing, but we didn't put every single angle possible on the unit circle. We just did specific ones. We did the standard angles. Okay? So 17 through 22 are done just like the ones at the top. When you get down to 23, it looks like it's got to be different, but it's really not. Okay, I need a little bit more room to work, so I'm going to copy it on another page. All right, so here's what we've got for number 23. Both of these angles are on the unit circle. They are between 0 and 360. They also happen to be between 0 and 90, so I don't have to fool with coterminals. I don't have to fool with reference angles. They're both in quadrant 1, so I know they're both going to be positive. So I'm just going to find the values. For the cosine of 60 degrees, cosine is above here, so that's the square root of 1, which is 1 over 2. So the cosine of 60 is 1/2. Now I have to find the sine of 30 degrees. So back here, this is 30 degrees. Your cosine is above, your sine is underneath. So the square root of 1 is 1 over 2, gives me 1/2. I've got my 4 on the bottom. And now just simplify. 1/2 plus 1/2 is 1 over 4, and that's your answer. Okay, and this is part of what y'all are going to work on for the rest of class today. So you can go ahead and get started, and I'll ask questions as you have them.